Good afternoon, teachers. I want to take a couple of seconds to talk about your benchmark paper, which is due next week. So your benchmark paper really serves as your final because it asks you to pull everything that you've been learning about and reading about, or at least most everything. It doesn't, probably is not going to touch on STEM, and that's why STEM is last, and probably wouldn't touch on for many of you AR or VR, which again is why those are towards the last. But everything else, including the digital divide that you read about last week, is going to be taught, should be addressed in this paper. And so, for example, the first criteria: provide relevant research-based rationale explaining how technology is used appropriately to design and plan instruction that supports student learning. Of course, everything's about student learning. So we're looking at this first one right here. This would be where you would talk about, obviously at the beginning of your paper you're going to have an introduction, and this is as good a place as any, but what you put in your introduction is up to you. But what you're going to want to talk about as it relates to this criteria is this is where you would talk about Tpac. This is where you would talk about SAMR. Tpac is the research-based justification for using technology in your lesson plan. When it says what's the research-based rationale explaining how the technology is used, that's what you're going to talk about, right? That's what Tpac is. You're using this technology because it supports you teaching, that's the pedagogical part of it, this content. So that's where, you would address that. Offers a relevant research-based rationale explaining how technology is used appropriately to provide differentiated instruction for all learners. So this is where you're going to talk about differentiated, and that could be anything from talking about the digital divide, right? Because that's what you're doing in this. When you're including technology, one of the things you're doing is differentiating your instruction to make sure that those risk groups are not, especially if we're talking about any of them, that they're not in danger of double jeopardy where they're not getting it at home and they're not getting it at school. So that would just be one place. If we're talking about using assessment technology, and remember all of your lessons should have had assessment technology in them, that was the only technology that had to be used was some form of assessment technology, then we know from our readings that that's how we differentiate our instruction. That's one way we differentiate our instruction, right, is through the use of assessment technology. Same way with if you're using apps and mobile technology. Mobile technologies, as we know from your readings, allow you to differentiate your instruction. So this would be where you would be talking about your readings as it related to assessment technology, your readings as it related to mobile learning, okay, and you're bringing that in here because whenever it's mentioned in research-based rationale, that's what we're talking about, is your readings that you've done for this classroom. And with that said, let me just say, I don't give weekly quizzes in here on your readings because I know you're going to demonstrate it here too, just because the semester is already so jam-packed with everything else. But I can always tell who has and hasn't done the reading to some extent by what they cite at the end of the semester. And every semester there are 2 or 3 people who cite none of the works and end up citing research that they've gone and found, oftentimes very short practitioner pieces that are not research-based, okay? Some website that they found, that they try to substitute in their works cited page. And remember, everything needs to be in parenthetical documentation, APA formatted, with a reference section. They're actually not called a works cited, it's called a reference section, APA, old language arts teacher, but nonetheless, that is a red flag to me when students are not citing the work that we've done, that we've read, but other works, again, oftentimes that are practitioner and origin. So I'm expecting you to pull in. You're more than welcome to go and find additional research, and students do that also, but you should be citing our research, and that's what we're looking for in this section. Offers a thorough review of research throughout the analysis to discuss use of research-based technology-infused instructional strategies that support learning for all students and APA formatted. And so this one is really connected to just that we're using research articles. If we look over here, and this is the section that you're looking in, that you're expected to be is developing for this class. This is really just talking about the part that that you're following APA formatting, and that you are citing research. But it also pulls in instructional strategies. Okay, and again, this connects to whatever technology you're reading, we've talked about or read about. How that connects to that, to different instructional strategies that we use. For example, assessment technologies, again, one of the instructional strategies or connections that we see to that is that technology allows us to adjust our instructional strategies because we receive immediate feedback by using it. Next section thoroughly explains how the lesson plan provides varied opportunities for all students to use appropriate technology to further learning through critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. These are directly connected to the ISTE standards, and this is a great place for you to pull in and discuss the ISTE standards, because if you go back and look at those ISTE standards, they're connected to communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. We can also talk about these if we're talking about, especially, well, really any of them. If we're talking about communication, if you're using a Google document, that's connected to communication. It's also connected to collaboration. If you're having them create a Padlet, then that's connected to creativity. So there are multiple ways that this connects to that. But it's also, when I see this, my first thought is the ISTE standards, which obviously you want to address in this paper. Next one thoroughly explains the use of technology to assess students. Obviously, this is where you're going to talk about your readings on assessment technologies, and then the last one is that you're going to discuss how you're using in your lesson plan technology in a safe, secure, equitable way. If we're talking about equity, that's the digital divide. We're talking about safe and secure, that's where we could be talking about one thing that we could be talking about in this is 21st century literacies, right? And also digital citizenship in this section. We could also be talking about the ISTE standards here again, because they're connected to this. So there's a lot of connections to this section here. So that is just kind of a quick overview of how you want to connect your paper to course content. And you need a concluding paragraph also. Please do not do not exceed the limit. Make sure that a lot of students miss the biggest portion of their points on the reference page. There's no reason to miss points on the reference page. It's very clear on the Purdue how you cite all resources, and there's just no reason to miss those points. So please review that so you don't lose them there. Okay, if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And that's the review of the benchmark paper.